All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Kachalas, and I'm the Director of Strategic Insights for Progressive Business Media. And I'm going to be your host for today's webinar, focusing on how messaging can turn web traffic into foot traffic. We have a lot of great insights to cover on the webinar, and I'm very excited to introduce our speakers for today. But before we get started, there's just a couple housekeeping items I'd like to go over. During the webinar, if you have any questions, please submit them in the questions section in the panel on the right-hand side of your screen. At the end of the webinar, we're going to take about 10 to 15 minutes to answer your questions. If at any point you're having technical problems during the webinar, we ask you to please try logging out, logging back in, or send a question in the chat box where a member of our technical team can answer your question. And finally, if you're registered for today's webinar and miss a segment of today's presentation, there will be a recording link that will be emailed to all registered attendees. All right, now that it's been covered, I'd like to introduce today's speakers. Our first speaker for today is Matt Boyce. Matt comes from a customer experience background, having consulted in built customer experience programs with businesses ranging from local retailers to Fortune 1000 companies. He currently is head of retail division for Podium, who services over 15,000 local businesses to help them get found, get chosen, and get connected to their consumers online. A husband of nearly 10 years and father of 3 children, Matt spends his free time with his family traveling, skiing, and exploring outdoors. Our next speaker for today is Nick Miller. Nick heads the demand generation department for Podium, a software as a service platform which helps local businesses interact with their consumers through SMS text messaging and influencing purchases decisions through streamlining a collection of management and online reviews. Nick's received his BA in communications from Brigham University and is a wealth of knowledge in digital marketing. We're working with Adobe and Lilly. All right, we're now ready to start. Matt, I'm going to be opening up the webinar for you to begin your presentation.
Yes, thank you. We're excited to be here. We have worked with really hundreds of furniture stores across the country. We've seen what has worked and what hasn't worked, and so we've essentially compiled tips and tricks from our experience working in the industry. So what we'll go through specifically is, first, we'll dig into how messaging can impact the furniture buying experience and really modernize that. Second, we'll go into how then we turn that into revenue, how messaging can drive sales. And then we've got 8 specific tips that are very actionable that you'll be able to walk away from the webinar and begin implementing right away. So that those tips will help you improve your customer's journey as they essentially interact with you.
Great. So let's dive into it. Really to tee the rest of this webinar up and to get to some of those tips and tricks and some of the things that hopefully are tangible takeaways for you today. We want to first set the stage of just why messaging is important and how it fits into that modern furniture shopping experience. We attend a lot of events, as do you, and keep track of kind of some of the industry insights and data. One of the statistics that is thrown around a lot and that you certainly experienced in your own stores is that it wasn't that long ago, even 5-10 years ago, where a consumer would typically visit a store 5 or 6 times, not necessarily the same store, but visit a store 5 or 6 times before making a purchase decision. And that's really changed over the last even several years, where that 5 or 6 store visits has turned into just over 1, which tells us that one is that the modern day consumer is really informed. They get most of their information online. They do a lot of research. They read reviews. They have a great idea of what they're looking for when they walk into the store. And they still absolutely need that brick and mortar experience. They need your RSAs and the salespeople that you have. But they are a very informed customer typically as they walk in to one of your storefronts. And a lot of that starts online. Even just to kind of iterate that, like I remember growing up, we're here in Salt Lake City, Utah, and I remember Saturdays were a day that we would fill up. I have 5 brothers and sisters. We would pack my parents' Astro van and some of the local furniture retailers that are near us are like RC Willey. We had a Bassett near us and a few others. And when it was time to go shopping for something, I can remember, loading up again that van and hitting store to store. And I remember getting the free hot dog at RC Willey on a Saturday. And that was just how we did it, right? It was a whole Saturday experience. And that's just not the case anymore. Typically, that shopping experience, rather than starting with piling your kids in an Astro van, starts online. 93% of consumers do their research online when trying to find a furniture store. So this is an important part of what we'll talk about today. This is not just for products that they're looking, but also for the actual business, the store that they want to interact with. Because that's what we're looking for as consumers. We want the best product. We also want the best experience. And that's why not only are they researching specific products or what they should put in their homes, but who they should work with to put that in their homes. When people are doing those searches, mobile really is king. Over 60% of all searches are happening on mobile devices, and really for a retailer, this is where business is won or lost. If you think about your own browsing experiences, 60% may even feel low to you. If you're working on a desktop throughout the day, maybe that percentage, is tweaked towards a desktop version. But for your personal browsing, most of that is going to be happening on your cell phone, first of all, and on tablets. And so for a retailer, if you are not mobile optimized, if you're not making yourself conveniently accessible there for mobile web traffic, you will lose that business to someone who is. When they are using those mobile searches and as they're looking for a store or someone to have that shopping experience with, convenience really is kind of the name of the game. If you think about all the major disruptors of their industry, convenience is really what they've nailed down. So you look at the Ubers of the world, the Netflix, even Amazon for a lot of lower end retail. What they've done is just made a convenient experience for consumers, and that's why they've been able to disrupt those industries. Because we interact with so many of those disruptors and have such convenience, and technology has made it so that we can do that, the expectation is bled into really all aspects of our life, that we expect that same convenience no matter who we're interacting with. So a statistic here, on average, a customer will wait 23 minutes for a response before moving on to a competitor. So it's not a very big window, right? If I'm trying to get a hold of you, if I have a question, if I'm trying to get an answer, if I can't get that quickly, I have other options now as a consumer, and those are pretty easily accessible. So it's important to not only, again, make yourself available and easily found online, but convenient to interact with from there. So, one of our customers from Neil's Furniture put it really well. Just, we find text messages to be so much less intrusive on people's daily lives than a phone call. And that may feel backwards when you first initially hear it. I talk to a lot of business owners and store managers who are like, obviously we like the personal touch that comes with being able to interact with someone on a phone or in person. And that's absolutely true. There's nothing that can really replace a face-to-face conversation, and sometimes even a phone call. But oftentimes the conversations and the information that you need to get out to your consumers and they need to get to you can be much more easily solved through something like a text message. If you look at all the time that you are using with phone tag, for example, it could be a really simple question or something they need to do or information they need from you. I am busy during the day, and I know you're busy during the day, and if a vendor or someone I'm working with is trying to get a hold of me, the chances are that phone call goes to voicemail, and when I try to call them back an hour later, the chances are that goes to voicemail as well. And so that it becomes time consuming, which is also expensive for businesses as you start looking at the time that you could save, when a lot of times those messaging can actually solve and be less intrusive on people's daily lives than an actual phone call. I think about, a conversation me and my wife were having was someone called her, and it was a number she didn't recognize, right? It wasn't saved in her phone. So like most people, she's like, I'm not answering. If it's important, they'll send me a text. And I thought that was interesting because it used to be, if it's important, they'll leave me a voicemail. And now it's, if it's important, they will send me a text. So if it's like, she basically saying, if it's someone I want to actually talk to or feel like I should get a hold of, and if this is an important phone call, they're going to send me a text. And that's not uncommon. That's how we act in our personal lives, but that is our preferred means of communication now, even with the businesses we work with. Messaging is a great way just to get the conversation started. As people are looking, again, like there's a lot of options. It's not just you're competing with the guy down the road anymore, but you're competing with all the different ways someone can buy furniture. And messaging is a great way to get those conversations started. And it's part of just really defining experience.
Yeah, if you think back to Nick's parents loading all the kids into the van, driving from store to store to store, and really they probably had the question of, do you have this one type of furniture set that we're looking for? And if so, then they'd much rather just go to the store that either has it or that can order it or whatever it is, versus spending all day loading and unloading kids. And so we're not saying that every single conversation can be moved to a text message or a short form message like that, because you'll still have phone calls. But a lot of those early, qualifying questions of, do you have this type of inventory? Do you finance? Do you deliver? What are your hours? Those types of conversations can start with a text message. And then once you've got them in your inbox, it's easy to continue that conversation, get them to come into the store later.
Yeah. It's a great point, Matt. And just to kind of build on that, a lot of the times when someone has a question for you, it's not necessarily happening during store hours. A lot of times I am not doing my shopping, and your consumers are not doing their research and their shopping while you are there waiting for that phone call. They're doing it while they're watching TV at night, while they're laying in bed with their phones. And messaging is a great way to still be able to take advantage of those people who are shopping at those hours and have those kind of initial questions like Matt's talking about, without necessarily having to pick up a phone right when they call, or being available for them to walk into your store. To kind of hammer that point, right? Like, it is not just more convenient for the customer, it is preferred. 90% of customers prefer messaging to other forms of communication. Again, it goes back to just how we operate on a day-to-day basis, not necessarily with the businesses we work with, now really with the businesses we work with, but how we interact with our personal conversations and relationships. I talk to my family members. I talk to one of my brothers almost every day, at least to communicate with them. It's primarily through text messages. I don't pick up the phone very often and talk to them. I just don't have the time. And that is just how I prefer to interact. I tell this story about, interaction with my wife. This is not to throw her under the bus, but her and I are chatting, having a conversation face to face the other day, and you can hear in her phone, in her pocket, that her phone vibrates, and as I am talking to her, she reaches in her pocket, pulls out her phone, starts reading this text message, and then actually starts responding to that text message as I am still talking to her. And I'm like, what is that, like a super important text? How did that text message somehow supersede our conversation that we're having face to face? And she's like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I'm listening. I didn't even realize. And it's not like my wife's problem. It's a text messaging epidemic. It's just how we are conditioned almost today, especially the generation that's grown up with a cell phone. And what's funny is that generation is your customer these days. Like that has changed a little bit, right? Like everyone talks about how to cater to millennials, and it's because millennials and the generation just before it, like they are the ones buying new homes. They're the ones moving, they're starting families, they're buying furniture, and certainly your demographic still caters to, the baby boomers and those with maybe even more disposable income. But that generation is not coming, it is here, right? That grew up with the cell phone the majority of their life and are conditioned to text, and that's why it's become this preferred means of communication. What's also nice about it is really on the go. You think about someone who is on your browser, or trying to do live chat, for example, on your website, or going from meeting to meeting. Convenience on the go is important for today's consumer. Google kind of coined this phrase of micro moments, and they really try to cater to the micro moments. What that basically means is very rarely do I sit down and have on my calendar blocked off on the day, I'm going to research couches for the next 30 minutes to an hour. But when I think of it, something triggers that, oh yeah, I do need to look at this couch. Like I do a quick search and it's a micro moment. It's in those quick instances where someone has accessibility at their fingertips, that they think of it, they have a few minutes, they research. And so that convenience on a go is extremely important from that mobile device. And also with those conversations, not being tied to a computer to get information, not being, having to sit down or step out of a meeting or something else to be able to communicate with you. Those messaging capabilities allow you to carry on those conversations and make it very convenient for you and the consumer and your potential and customers to carry those conversations for longer period of times without requiring as much attention on either side.
Yeah, if you think about the business, the furniture store that wins in the future is going to be the one that's incredibly convenient to work with. And so the business that can adapt and become that first is going to win here. If I just think about my wife's shopping behavior, she's essentially your ideal customer, where she's a young millennial, always trying to find something that's new and even trendy. But she does most of her shopping on her phone while she's putting the kids to bed, or while she's feeding the kids lunch, or something like that. And so she doesn't necessarily want to be tied to a chat or be on the phone the entire time, on hold or routing between people. She sort of just wants to message back and forth and ask a couple questions. So the business that can essentially implement that first, my theory is will win that market.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, just last kind of point here, you're interacting on a preferred channel. Some of the pitfalls of messaging that I see retailers fall into is that they have some form of messaging where someone can reach out, and then they follow up with that with an email. So the customer reach out via texting or via messaging platform, and then you reach out to them via phone call or via email or some other way. And if you think in your personal life, I hate that. Like if I text someone and they call me immediately, I'm like, oh man, I just texted you probably for a reason, because that's how I wanted to communicate with you. Your consumers aren't different. If they're reaching out to you and look, more and more they're going to have, we'll talk a little bit about this, but more and more consumers will have avenues, they'll have ways to message your business, whether you like them to or not. Apple, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, you name it. They're building business messaging tools that allow people to reach out to you. And if you're not communicating back in that preferred, means of communication, you're going to be able to miss out on business, and it feels almost like a janky kind of solution for the consumer. So when consumers are reaching out via messaging, you want to be able to respond in that preferred method. The other thing I see as far as furniture retailers go, some pitfalls, is that the texting things they have in place, which is a good first step, is often one way, right? Like you can push out a notification, let them know delivery is coming, or you can push out a notification letting them know something, but there's no way for them to actually respond and interact with you. And so while it's a great way to push out information, it is not true customer interaction, and it's not a great customer experience. If I'm pushing out messages to say, hey, your delivery's coming, and they text back and say, actually, I'm running 30 minutes late, or I need to reschedule, if that goes to outer space, or there's no way for them to communicate back to you, then you're really missing out on what the power of messaging really is. So with that, let me say this. Thanks for being patient on this first part. Give us the chance to stand on our soapbox about why messaging is so important. Most business owners and retailers I talk with will go through this stuff, and it's like, look, Nick, dude, I get it. Messaging is really, really important. But now let us dive into the how, right? The why and the how. Like, why should you care? Like, messaging is coming. It's a very important thing. But how does it drive revenue? And then how the heck do I do it? Which is kind of the rest of the meat and the potatoes of this webinar.
Yeah, essentially we're on the call because we want to figure out how to grow our business and make more money. So here's the how and the why. So essentially, messaging generates growth. Conversations that start in a text message versus a phone call are 3 times more likely to end in a sale. And you'd almost think it was reverse, where somebody that's willing to pick up the phone and engage with you is a more serious buyer. However, via text message, you can easily send them a follow-up to say, even a couple days later, hey, would you like to come in? Or we just got that same piece you're looking for. We want to show it to you. So you're able to keep that conversation going. Additionally, lead volume increases. So Podium has over 30,000 businesses that are using our tool, and we saw that businesses that essentially went from just having a chat window on their website to having a text-based chat tool on their website saw their inbound opportunities grow by 11 times. I think each of us would want 11x growth on our leads. Additionally, we're seeing more qualified leads. So with messaging, you can go back and forth and determine things like their budget or preferences, even their timeline before that customer comes into that showroom. So you essentially are able to qualify how near they are to purchasing before they're entering your store. It allows you to figure out maybe which people you should focus on and which ones you shouldn't.
Yeah, I think Matt brings up a really good point on a couple of these things. Is especially with the 11 times more leads and qualified leads. If you think about your marketing funnel, your kind of customer journey, there's a term that marketers will use called a leaky bucket. And basically throughout this whole process, maybe your broadcast media, you got commercials or billboards and radio advertisement, you're getting your name out there. And then the next step, everyone who takes the next step from there is kind of in a narrow bucket. And then that bucket kind of pours into the narrow bucket. Maybe they're on your website, and that bucket kind of goes into the people who walk into your store. Each time that they kind of transfers to that next bucket or that next step, if the next step is hard to take, that's what you'd call a leaky bucket. And you see a lot of retailers today that have leaky buckets. Maybe it's your Google My Business page. You spend all this money to get them to Google your business, and most people will Google you before they go to your URL. That's how they get to your URL. Even if their intention is to get to you, they'll still Google you. Maybe your leaky bucket is your Google My Business page. You have poor reviews or not enough reviews or not enough content there. For some retailers, it's their website. You spend thousands and thousands of dollars on your website, and it may look beautiful, but to Matt's point, if they can't take the next step from there, if it's a contact form or a live chat that's not being monitored very closely, that becomes a leaky bucket to your business. And so that's why this messaging, one, generates more leads, but they're also more qualified leads, because those people who will get to that point, they're pretty far down that funnel. In fact, a kind of a almost mind-blowing statistic that Google will give you is that about half of the customers, half of the searchers who look for, who do a near me search. So if I'm like best furniture store near me, about half of those searchers in 24 hours will then visit a store. And about half of those that visit the store will be purchasing customers within 48 hours. So if you look at the people who are making those searches, those guys and gals are pretty far down that marketing funnel, and they're going to give a quarter of those people are going to give their business somewhere. And so if it's not you, it will be someone else. So to Matt's point, generating more leads, but also more qualified leads through messaging becomes very important.
Additionally, with short form messaging like text messaging, Facebook Messenger, messages like that, essentially the customer is so much more likely to get that message. So with messaging available on just about every single device, 99% of text messages are opened. If we compare that with email, a pretty good email open rate might be 20 to 30%. And if you just think about the numbers of this, one inbox that I'm thinking of is my dad's. So my dad is in his late 50s. He subscribes to almost every newsletter in the world, it seems like, and at any point he's got 10,000 unread emails in his inbox. But if you look at his cell phone, he never has more than 2 to 3 unread text messages. And so where are you more likely to stand out? It's definitely going to be that cell phone text message inbox. Additionally, messaging can be flexible and efficient. So furniture stores who use messaging, say it saves an average of really 4 to 5 hours per week. which allows you to focus on those channels that matter the most. If you just think about how this works, when you're on the phone with a prospect, you can really only speak with one person at a time. And so by the time the phone rings, either you pick up or they pick up, you've got to have this one-to-one conversation. If they don't pick up, you leave a voicemail. It just takes time. Vice versa, if you're in text messaging, you're able to maybe have a saved template, so you can answer some of the same questions over and over and over again just by sending off a templated response. And you could pretty easily carry on conversations with 5 to 10 people in the same amount of time you're carrying on a conversation with 1 or 2 over the phone. Additionally, we've hinted at this a little bit in the past as well, but this allows you to keep that conversation going longer. So one of the benefits of having a centralized messaging platform like Podium is you see all of those conversations with your customers in one centralized place, regardless of who has that conversation. And so if you had somebody that purchased 6 months ago, or maybe even only came into the store and nearly purchased but didn't, you're able to go back in, see that conversation, and essentially continuing it without losing any momentum. Now, additionally, let's talk about creating a better relationship. So 7 in 10 businesses who are using messaging say it leads to a better customer relationship, where essentially they're going from being a furniture store to being their furniture store, the ones that they texted with, ones that were very convenient to interact with.
Yeah, I think the psychology of it's kind of interesting, right? When it makes us feel good. Like I just needed I'm doing some new asphalt, some new cement, at my home, and I asked a couple of people, and inevitably you're like, hey, I gotta do some painting, or I need to go buy this thing. Someone's going to perk up and be like, oh, let me tell you, I got this guy. And that makes us feel good to be able to recommend. It makes us feel important, honestly, to have like someone that we have saved in our cell phone that we can then pass along to someone else because they're going to get you the best deal. Or, oh man, he or she's going to take really good care of you. And that's what you're really going for here is when they've got your RSA or your phone number or your store number saved in their phone, you become that. You become their furniture store or their person to buy, an appliance from or whatever it is. And that's a good place to be. When next time they need something, they don't start that search over again. They go to their contacts in their phone versus a search on Google.
Additionally, that same thing leads to more happy customers, which means more happy referrals or more referrals. So by delivering a superior experience to one person, they're going to tell their friends, they're going to recommend their friends come to you. And additionally, you'll see that once you've really solved someone's problem and solved it well, instead of pulling out their cell phone and again making that same search of best furniture store near me, they're simply going to look in their conversations, find you, and engage with you again. So you'll see that a lot of those happy customers return again and again.
Awesome. So this is so kind of to wrap things up here. We'll talk about 7 kind of messaging tips for furniture stores. So these are some of the most common ways that we are seeing the furniture stores we work with and just in the industry, the way people are effectively using messaging in their stores to increase revenue, decrease some of their costs, and quite frankly, mitigate some of the risks that you incur as a business owner, as manager, when you are texting on anything, if you're texting on personal cell phone devices, that type of thing. So number 1 is just to schedule deliveries. So as you are all aware that the time they purchase a piece and some furniture in your store to the time it is delivered and in their homes is a pretty crucial time, right? Oftentimes, if something's going to go wrong or if they lose some customer experience there, it's going to happen in that time frame. And making sure that you are on the same page with that consumer with deliveries is an excellent way to help mitigate some of that risk of a delivery gone wrong or any type of negative experience there. Makes it very easy to schedule those deliveries and is, again, a great way to communicate that information. The other great thing, if you are using a tool like Podium, is that conversation is very easy to transfer from the sales rep to maybe the finance team to the delivery guy, so that there's context there. There's continuity in the conversation that's been happening. So it makes it very easy for the consumer to have that continuity, but very good for you as a business as well to be able to have context around the conversations and the delivery that's happening, having visibility into the rest of that purchasing journey.
Additionally, you're able to send a last-minute update, maybe the morning of or something like that, where you end up with just a higher hold rate when you're able to send that message. A similar example, if you're sending those out via a phone, you're leaving a voicemail, they may or may not have saved your phone number. It might be coming from a number they don't recognize. They probably won't answer a call from an unknown number. You might leave a voicemail, and then when it's from an unknown number, there's less urgency to get it. They might get to that voicemail a couple hours later when they've got some time. And so your ability to get into their inbox and get their attention in a timely manner is much more effective with messaging.
Yeah. Last thing I'll touch on delivery is again some of the pitfalls that I see with it's great, like sending out the reminder is important. What really saves you, though, in the end, if there is any issues, is their ability to get back to you. So I see a lot of systems that have one-way texting, and that's good. They're at least getting that information that we talked about. 90+% of people will read that message, but their ability to then communicate back to you is important as well. Third tip here is just to answer questions. A lot of times these questions that consumers will have are things that can be solved via text message. They have an idea of what they're looking for in mind. They found this picture on Pinterest and they want to see if you have something similar. They'll ask about certain brands that you carry, financing, whatever else it is. It's a very convenient way for them to ask those quick initial questions that they want answered before they kind of take that next step. Also through the buying process, right? It's not an uncommon thing for a husband or a wife to come in and look at things initially and then need to talk to their spouse or significant other to really kind of come to a purchase decision. That sales rep wants to keep up with them, or maybe Matt alluded to certain inventory changes. They're looking for colors. So we often see this, that questions are being answered. Pictures are being exchanged back and forth with materials, fabrics, whatever it is. And that conversation, to our earlier point, can happen over a period of time rather than, having both ends of the communicating party being very attentive. It can happen over a little bit longer time and generally convert at a higher rate because of that.
You're also able to send updates. So we've talked about phone tag a few times here, but essentially, playing phone tag is wasting your wasting your business's time. So if you're able to send a message, you can talk about shipping, inventory, pricing updates, all via messaging, which ends up being a lot more efficient.
I talked about the ability to send back and forth pictures, videos. We're all visual people, and most people are, especially when it's something like furniture that you're going to be putting into your home. I'll tell you what, when we bought our new home, I felt like we spent more time looking, and when I say we, I do mean my spouse mostly. She spent more time looking at, the couches we were going to put in our living room than I feel like the actual house. And that's not uncommon. It's really kind of an extension of our personalities of how we want to be represented when someone visits our home. And so visually, that's an important aspect of messaging, that they can see the furniture, that they can send you their ideas, that you can respond back with those images, videos. And at times it can be really important to do documents and other types of things that you can send via messaging that becomes very convenient.
We have so many examples from our customers where they might do a video walkthrough of their showroom to show them the 5 couches they might be interested in, or do more of a deep dive saying, here's the 4 key features of this one piece all on that video, and send it off. And so by the time the customer has seen all those, they're just much more likely to engage. They feel like they're getting sort of this white glove service, and it's not hard on the business side to fulfill that.
Yeah, and last thing I'll mention on this, and it doesn't have to do with just pictures and videos, but through all of this, in this customer journey, you're leaving yourself a nice paper trail. If someone calls and they're like, hey, do you have X, Y, and Z? And you're like, yeah, and then a day later that sales rep is like, what was it they were looking for, if they hadn't like ran to their CRM and updated their notes? But you leave yourself a really nice paper trail with those conversations throughout the buying process and afterwards when you have this messaging thread. And again, the nice thing about using a tool like Podium is that that's centralized, so those are not siloed off on individual cell phones, but those conversations are available for managers and supervisors, whoever, owners, to be able to see those messages and make sure those conversations are appropriate and on point, and can go back if they need to get information.
So use messaging to follow up. Businesses see 3x increases in response rates when following up via messaging rather than a phone call. This seems relatively simple, but just on the customer experience, it's less intrusive to just get a text message to say, hey, are you still looking for blank? And they may have been too busy to call back, or maybe it's a little bit intimidating or confrontational to talk about pricing or something like that on the phone. And so by making it more casual in a text message, we see a higher increase response rate there.
Last tip for the day is just to use messaging to gather feedback. And there's a couple of ways that we see most commonly for our furniture stores that we work with to gather feedback. One, and what many of you probably know us for, is just the ability to generate public feedback on review sites like Google or Facebook. And it becomes a very convenient way for someone to give you that feedback on those public domains. People want to give feedback generally. If I had a good experience, I don't mind giving you feedback. If you don't make it easy for me, I'm not going to do it. Unless, for whatever reason, I had a bad experience. Then suddenly I'm super motivated to go tell everybody what a terrible place you are. But your generally satisfied customer is not going to take the time to go leave that feedback, that positive feedback, unless you make it easy for them. Messaging is a great way to make it easy on you to solicit for the feedback, and really easy for the customer to make sure they're giving you feedback, first of all, on public review sites. What I see most commonly with the furniture stores we work with is that they're generating, the ones that do this really well, they're generating feedback post-sale for public sites, review sites like Google. That's when the content is generally more applicable to what they want on their review sites, like the experience in the showroom, the piece of furniture they just purchased, the experience with the sales rep. And then gathering feedback, private feedback, which many of you are doing. So delivery feedback, NPS feedback after the experience is complete, that furniture has been delivered, maybe directly after, a day after, to kind of get the soup to nuts experience of what they had. So most commonly, I would say that the stores we work with that do this really well gather, again, public feedback post-sale, and then private feedback for delivery feedback, NPS, Net Promoter Score feedback post-delivery. And it's, again, all about convenience. With our customers that are using our NPS, or our Net Promoter Score feedback, delivery feedback, we're seeing response rates of 40% for many of our customers, which is incredible, rich data for you then to go take back to your team and digest that. And if you need to, find operational things that you can change to be better. So with that is the presentation today. Thank you for being patient as we kind of plowed through that 40 minutes. We'd love to save some time here for some questions and answers.
All right, we're going to open the webinar up now for questions. If you have not already submitted your questions, you can now do so by inputting them in the question panel on the right-hand side of your screen. Looks like one of the first questions is, why should we use text-based web tool instead of a live chat?
Yeah, so one of the key things with most standard live chats on your website typically require that they stay on that browser and they stay at their computer. And so tell me if this sounds familiar. You chat in on a website, They say, we'll get with you in a few minutes. You start looking in another browser. By the time you realize that they had finally responded, you get back to it and they've already said, hey, sorry, the session has ended, and you've got to start all over again. So essentially, by doing a text-based system where it takes the conversation away from your browser and into your native messaging application on your phone, you're able to continue that conversation even after you navigate away from that window.
Yeah, I think Matt kind of nailed it, right? The other thing I'll add is just for off hours, you have some more flexibility there. So the way our customers are using, a text-based messaging, web chat tool is that after hours, someone can still text into your business, get an auto response to saying, hey, you reached us off hours. But then when their sales reps come in, a lot of the retailers I work with, they're like, yeah, we'd love sales reps come in. They got 4 or 5 fresh leads that happen just even off hours that they can start engaging with that customer. Where on a live chat, sometimes it's hard to capture those people unless you have someone monitoring that all hours of the day. So,
great. Okay. Another question we have here is, would you send a feedback survey text during the end of the sale or after delivery?
Yeah, it's a great question. What I most commonly see depends on the type of feedback you're getting. Post-sale, and as close to that transaction as possible, is generally the best time to generate public feedback. So if you're requesting feedback for a review site like Google, for example, generally you want to do that post-sale. Again, a couple of the reasons why that we see is one, the content that they will leave on that public review site is more in line with what you want other researchers seeing. So if you send that public review invite after delivery, a lot of the feedback is going to be about delivery. It was the most top of mind for that consumer. Where if you do it post-sell, they're going to talk about your showroom. They're going to talk about the experience with the sales rep. They're going to talk about the piece of furniture they purchased. And so that content is a little bit more in line with what you are trying to market when someone is reading those reviews. So public reviews, solicitation, we would recommend doing post-sell, and then get your private feedback, your delivery feedback, your survey feedback, net promoter score if you're doing that post-delivery, so that you can see kind of beginning to end what their experience was, but take care of those things internally and use that for operational changes. Ideally, you're using both, right? You're marrying the two. The feedback you're getting publicly is going to have some golden nuggets there and some trends. So you can kind of see, hey, my 5-star customers are 5-star customers because of these things, and my 3-star customers are 3-star customers because of these things. You marry that with your private feedback where you can kind of marry those trends. And again, if you need to, make operational changes to improve, or just double down on the things you're great at.
All right, sounds good. Next question we have here is, can we send pictures and videos over text messages?
Yeah, if you go back and rewatch the presentation, you can see, so we do that. It's not very different from how you're essentially going to do it in your native application or your native messaging application. You're able to upload images, upload videos, and send those off, and it's a really popular feature on our tool.
Okay, looks like the final question here is, what if my business only has a landline?
Sorry, can you repeat that? Was it if they do not have a landline or do have a landline?
Only have a landline.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, so that's okay. Depending on the service you're using, if you're using like a Podium, for example, we can actually convert that landline into a textable number so that the number that your customers are texting back and forth with is actually your store number. That way, if it does warrant a phone call, maybe the messaging back and forth, and then like, great, let's jump on a call. When they call you from that thread, it will actually go to a store rather than someone's personal cell phone. So using a Podium, we can convert that landline to a textable device. And again, we want to be clear, like the goal here is not to go out and buy all of your employee cell phones that they can start texting from. The goal is to keep it in a centralized place where you have the ability to text, but from a platform versus a device. So, and in fact, we recommend it. If you have a landline, turn that into the line that you're actually texting with your consumers. So no problem at all if you have the right platform.
Yeah, in many cases, you've been advertising that number for years. You may even have people that just recognize it from your jingle or anything like that. And so keep that number. Don't get a new one. Just make that number a textable number.
Okay, looks like we just got another question in here. You spoke to several statistics during your presentation. Who did this information come from? Is it guests or Richard Ward, the furniture stores you work with, or is it blind sample?
Yeah, we have some of those came from our own users, and many of them came from surveys that both we have published as well as others. So many of those same stats are published on our blog, and you can go through that. We typically do have a sources page, and it looks like it just got left off this deck. Sorry about that.
Yeah, to Matt's point, a lot of it's on our website. A lot of it's from our own survey. Again, we work with 30,000 customers, thousands of retailers, and so we survey our customers often, and obviously track ROI that our customers are seeing. A lot of this too, there's some great resources that have these statistics out there, like some of the things we talked about with Google. You can get to like thinkwithgoogle.com, and there's a lot of kind of industry thought leaders that can provide these for you as well. If there's anything in particular you'd like to see. So I guess the point is we're really careful on what we throw out as statistics on our side, and so we only use very trusted sources, and a lot of that is our own research and data from customers that are giving that information back to us. If there's any statistic in particular you'd like to find more about, you can feel free to reach out to me. This is Nick, and it's nick@podium.com.
Okay, looks like the last question here we have. Can you recommend the wording to ask for a customer to write a review on Facebook or Google?
Our standard template that we use basically says, hello, customer name. Thanks for choosing insert business name. We'd really appreciate a review. Could you take 30 seconds and click the link below?
Yeah, and that's pretty standard. I think the wording is important, and sometimes if you want to control the content, you can kind of plant some seeds there. And hey, we'd love to hear feedback on your in-store experience today, or whatever it is. And again, we have templates and things to do that. I think almost more important is, again, that convenience factor of how it's delivered and when it's delivered. Really a great best practice, whether you are manually sending out review solicitations or it's being done automatically through your POS system or CRM, is to have the rep that they've been working with tee it up and let them know that that's coming. So some common language there would, if I was the sales rep, I would say, hey, thank you so much, Mr. and Mrs. Customer. We really appreciate working with you today. We're excited you got that piece of furniture we've been looking for. I would really love some feedback just on how your experience was today. I'm going to send a quick text to you to make it easy, or something along those lines. Teeing it up like that, and letting them know that you're going to be asking for feedback, how it's being delivered, and why it's important for you. All can facilitate higher conversion rates and better content when you are soliciting for the feedback.
All right, it looks like that was our final question. That concludes today's webinar. Matt, Nick, I want to thank you for your time today. It was great insights you provided today, and thank you everyone else for joining us on today's webinar.
Thank you.